The sound of flesh striking flesh echoed through the first-class cabin. Jasmine Wright's cheek burned as Captain Harrison towered over her, his face contorted with rage. "Your kind doesn't belong here," he snarled, unaware he'd just assaulted the woman who secretly owned 40% of Sky America Airlines. Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination, power, and justice, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe right now if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling. Trust me, you won't believe how Jasmine turns the tables on this racist pilot who picked the wrong passenger to mess with. Jasmine Wright was not your typical first-class passenger, at least not in the eyes of those who saw only her skin color. At 32, the self-made tech billionaire had mastered the art of flying under the radar. Her company, CyberShield, valued at $8.2 billion, had revolutionized data security for corporations worldwide, yet Jasmine preferred that few people recognized her face. She wore simple, though expensive, clothes, no flashy jewelry or designer logos that screamed wealth. Her natural hair was styled in elegant box braids, and her makeup was minimal. This wasn't about hiding, it was about observing. Born in Greenbrier, one of Atlanta's struggling neighborhoods, Jasmine had clawed her way up from poverty through sheer brilliance and determination. Her single mother had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, often leaving young Jasmine alone with her coding books and a second-hand laptop she'd rebuilt from parts found at the local dump. By 16, she'd created her first security algorithm. By 22, she'd graduated from Georgia Tech with honors despite working full-time throughout her education. At 25, she founded CyberShield from her tiny apartment, and by 30, she'd made her first billion. Success means nothing if you don't understand how the world really works, Jasmine often told her executive team. This philosophy led to her unusual habit of traveling incognito on airlines, hotels, and restaurants she'd secretly invested in. She didn't want the VIP treatment that came with recognition, she wanted to see how these companies operated when they thought no one important was watching. Sky America Airlines had become her most significant observation project 2 years ago. After experiencing repeated discriminatory treatment on their flights, she'd quietly acquired 40% of the company's shares through various holdings. Not even the full board knew the identity of the mysterious investor who'd bought such a significant stake. On that fateful Tuesday morning, Jasmine boarded Sky America Flight 1267 from Atlanta to San Francisco, first-class ticket in hand. She'd chosen a midweek, mid-morning flight, not too busy, not too empty, perfect for observation. "Ticket, please," the gate agent said, her tone sharp as Jasmine approached. Jasmine handed over her boarding pass and ID. The agent's eyebrows shot up. "First class." She looked Jasmine up and down, taking in her simple black pants, white blouse, and blazer. Nothing about her outfit suggested she couldn't afford the ticket, yet the agent's skepticism was palpable. "Yes," Jasmine replied simply, maintaining her calm smile. "I'll need to verify this." "One moment." The agent made a show of checking her computer, though Jasmine's ticket had already scanned correctly. Behind her, a white businessman in a rumpled suit sailed through with barely a glance at his credentials. Jasmine noted the interaction in her mental log. Incident number 1. Once on the plane, the flight attendant at the door glanced at her ticket and frowned. "First class is to your left," she said loudly, as if Jasmine might not understand basic directions. Another passenger, an older white woman, received a warm, "Welcome aboard, enjoy your flight." Jasmine settled into her plush window seat in row 2 and began her usual routine, notebook out, observations logged in her private shorthand. She'd developed this system over years of similar experiences. As other first-class passengers boarded, Jasmine noticed the flight attendant's body language shift. Warm smiles and attentive service for some, cursory politeness for others. The pattern was clear to her trained eye. Captain Thomas Harrison performed his pre-flight walkthrough of the cabin 15 minutes before departure. At 58, Harrison was a Sky America institution, 30 years with the airline, decorated Air Force veteran, with a reputation for running a tight ship. His silver hair and confident stride projected authority as he greeted the first-class passengers. "Good morning, sir. Beautiful day for flying," he said warmly to an older white gentleman across the aisle from Jasmine. When he reached Jasmine's row, his smile faltered. "Ticket check," he said curtly. "I've already had my ticket checked 3 times, Jasmine replied politely. "Is there a problem?" "Just doing my job, ma'am," he said, emphasizing the last word with subtle disdain. "We need to ensure everyone is in their assigned seat." Jasmine noticed he hadn't asked anyone else for this verification. She calmly showed her ticket once more. Harrison's eyes narrowed slightly before he moved on without the friendly banter he'd shared with other passengers. As he reached the galley, Jasmine overheard him mutter to the head flight attendant, Pamela Miller, "We need to maintain standards in first class. It's not what it used to be." Miller nodded in agreement, casting a sideways glance at Jasmine. "I know exactly what you mean, Captain." Jasmine wrote in her notebook. Pre-flight discriminatory comment, Captain Harrison to F.A. Miller, 8:43 a.m. It was just another entry in what had become a disturbingly thick file on Sky America's corporate culture. As the remaining passengers boarded, Jasmine felt the weight of subtle hostility from the crew. She'd experienced this many times before, the unspoken message that she didn't belong in premium spaces despite having paid the same price as everyone else. But today felt different. The tension was thicker, the glances more obvious, the whispers barely concealed. Little did Captain Harrison know that his standards comment had just been documented by the woman who could determine his professional future. Jasmine closed her notebook as the boarding door sealed shut, preparing for what would prove to be the most consequential flight of Thomas Harrison's 30-year career. Flight 1267 climbed steadily through the cloud layer, leaving Atlanta's humidity behind. The seatbelt sign pinged off at 10,000 feet, and first-class service began promptly. The tension in the cabin, however, remained palpable. Pamela Miller moved efficiently through the cabin, distributing hot towels with silver tongs. "Towel?" she offered with a smile to the businessman across from Jasmine. When she reached Jasmine, she simply dropped the towel on her tray table without a word and moved on. Jasmine added another note to her growing list of observations. This wasn't simply bad service, this was calculated different treatment. Today's first-class brunch options are the smoked salmon eggs Benedict or the Belgian waffle with fresh berries, Miller announced to the cabin. "We also have our special seasonal offering, Southern shrimp and grits, as advertised in our premium menu." Jasmine had specifically chosen this flight for the shrimp and grits option. She'd researched Sky America's premium menu offerings as part of her observation project. When Miller reached her row, Jasmine smiled pleasantly. "I'd like the shrimp and grits, please." Miller's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, we're out of that option." "Already?" "I'm only the 4th person you've served," Jasmine observed calmly. "It's a limited offering," Miller replied curtly. "Eggs Benedict or waffle?" "The waffle, then," Jasmine said, making another note in her book. Minutes later, Jasmine watched as Miller served the shrimp and grits to a white passenger 2 rows ahead. Another passenger behind her also received the dish. Jasmine discreetly took out her phone and began recording this selective availability, keeping the device partially concealed by her napkin. Halfway through the meal service, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. The captain illuminated the seatbelt sign, and the flight attendants secured their carts. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Harrison," came the announcement. "We're experiencing some light chop. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened until we're through this rough air." The turbulence intensified briefly, then settled into a gentle rocking. Captain Harrison emerged from the cockpit to check on the first-class cabin, a courtesy he extended during rough flights. "Everyone doing all right?" he asked, moving down the aisle with a reassuring smile. When he reached Jasmine's row, his smile vanished as he noticed her phone partially hidden under her napkin, still recording. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "I'm documenting my experience," Jasmine replied evenly. You can't record the flight crew. It's against airline policy, Harrison asserted, though no such blanket policy existed. Actually, I've reviewed Sky America's policies thoroughly. There's no prohibition against passengers documenting their own experience, as long as it doesn't interfere with crew instructions or compromise safety, Jasmine countered, her voice calm but firm. Several nearby passengers had begun to watch the interaction. Harrison's face flushed with anger at being challenged. I'm not recording you, Captain Harrison, Jasmine continued. I'm documenting the discriminatory service I've received on this flight, including being denied a meal option that was subsequently served to other passengers. Harrison's face darkened further. Are you accusing my crew of discrimination? He said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I'm stating facts. I requested the advertised shrimp and grits and was told it wasn't available. Within minutes, I observed it being served to other passengers, Jasmine stated, her voice steady. You're causing a disruption, Harrison said, his voice rising. This is my aircraft, and I won't tolerate passengers creating problems. I'm sitting quietly in my assigned seat, speaking in a normal tone, Jasmine pointed out. How exactly am I disrupting anything? Something in Harrison snapped. Perhaps it was Jasmine's calm logic, perhaps it was being challenged by someone he'd already deemed unworthy of first-class service, or perhaps it was years of unchecked bias finally boiling over. Whatever the trigger, what happened next shocked everyone in the cabin. Your kind doesn't belong here, he snarled, and before anyone could react, his open palm connected with Jasmine's cheek in a sharp slap that echoed through the quiet cabin. Gasps erupted from surrounding passengers. Jasmine's head rocked back from the force, but her eyes never left Harrison's. She didn't raise her hand to her stinging cheek, didn't cry out. She simply stared at him, phone still recording. Did you just assault a passenger? Came an incredulous voice from across the aisle. Anthony Daniels, a distinguished-looking black man in his 50s, stood up from his seat. I'm an attorney with the Civil Liberties Coalition, and I just witnessed you commit assault and make a racist comment to this woman. Other passengers began to vocalize their shock. That was completely uncalled for. I can't believe what I just saw. Someone needs to report this. Harrison, suddenly aware of the magnitude of his action, took a step back. His training kicked in, but rather than de-escalate, he doubled down. This passenger is being disruptive and threatening the safety of this flight, he announced to the cabin. We'll be making an emergency landing in Denver, where she will be removed from the aircraft. She didn't do anything, protested a young woman who had been filming the entire interaction. You hit her. Anyone else who causes problems will also be removed, Harrison threatened, turning back toward the cockpit. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. As Harrison stalked away, Anthony Daniels moved to sit beside Jasmine. Are you all right? He asked quietly. I'm fine, Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite the red mark forming on her cheek. She reached for her phone and made a brief call. Darius? It's happening again. Yes, Sky America. This time the captain actually struck me. Denver, about 30 minutes. Yes, everything's recording. She ended the call and turned to Anthony. Thank you for speaking up. What he did was unconscionable, Anthony replied. And unfortunately, all too common. Do you have someone meeting you in Denver? Jasmine nodded, a hint of a smile finally crossing her face. Let's just say Captain Harrison picked the wrong passenger to assault today. As the aircraft began its unexpected descent toward Denver, passengers throughout the cabin were frantically texting and posting about what they'd witnessed. By the time wheels touched down on Denver's runway, what had happened in the first-class cabin of Flight 1267 was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Captain Harrison had no idea that the woman he just assaulted wasn't merely a passenger who could file a complaint that would be quietly buried by airline bureaucracy. He'd just slapped the face of the woman who controlled nearly half of Sky America's voting shares, and she had the whole incident on video. The Sky America jet taxied to a remote stand at Denver International Airport, away from the regular gates. Through the windows, passengers could see police vehicles and airline operations trucks speeding toward them across the tarmac. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison's voice came over the intercom, noticeably strained, "we've landed in Denver due to a security situation. Local authorities will be boarding to handle the matter. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." In first class, Jasmine sat calmly, still documenting everything in her notebook. The red mark on her cheek had darkened, but her composure remained unshaken. Anthony Daniels stayed beside her, having appointed himself her unofficial advocate. "They're going to try to remove you and control the narrative," he warned quietly. Classic damage control playbook. "I'm counting on it," Jasmine replied with surprising confidence. The aircraft door opened, and 3 Denver police officers boarded, followed by an airline representative in a Sky America blazer. They moved directly to first class. "Ma'am," the lead officer addressed Jasmine, "we need you to gather your belongings and come with us." Anthony stood immediately. "Officer, I'm Anthony Daniels, civil rights attorney. This woman was physically assaulted by the captain of this aircraft after being subjected to discriminatory treatment. Multiple passengers witnessed and recorded the incident." The officer looked uncertain, glancing between Jasmine, Anthony, and the airline representative. "That's not the report we received," the airline rep interjected. "Captain Harrison reported a disruptive passenger interfering with flight operations." "Check your phones," called out the young woman who had been recording. "I've already uploaded the video. It's trending on Twitter right now under #SkyAmericaAssault." Several other passengers held up their phones, showing they had also recorded the incident. "Officers," Jasmine finally spoke, her voice measured and clear, "I have the entire interaction recorded, including Captain Harrison making explicitly racist remarks before striking me across the face. I'd be happy to show you the footage right now." The police officers huddled briefly, then the lead officer nodded. "We'd like to see that footage, ma'am." As Jasmine was showing her video to the officers, the cockpit phone rang. Harrison answered it, his face visible through the partially open cockpit door. The passengers couldn't hear the conversation, but they could see Harrison's expression change from confidence to confusion to alarm. "What do you mean, board intervention?" His voice rose enough to be heard in the silent cabin. "Who authorized that?" In the galley area, flight attendant Pamela Miller's phone buzzed with an urgent message from airline headquarters. Her eyes widened as she read it, and she quickly made her way to the cockpit, whispering urgently to Harrison. The police officers finished reviewing Jasmine's video and the footage from other passengers. The lead officer turned to the airline representative. "This is clearly not a case of passenger disruption. The captain assaulted this woman, unprovoked. There must be some mistake," the representative stammered. "No mistake," Anthony stated firmly. "What we need now is for Captain Harrison to be removed from this aircraft, not Ms. Wright." The cockpit door swung fully open, and Harrison emerged, his face ashen. The airline representative's phone rang, and after a brief conversation, he looked at Harrison with something approaching horror. "Captain Harrison," he said, his voice now trembling slightly, "you're being removed from duty effective immediately. Corporate has sent a replacement pilot who's already en route." "On what grounds?" Harrison demanded, though his earlier confidence had evaporated. "Direct board intervention," the representative replied, clearly as confused as Harrison. "They've reviewed video of the incident." The lead police officer stepped forward. "Captain Thomas Harrison, you're being detained for investigation of assault. Please come with us." As the officers escorted a shell-shocked Harrison off the plane, the passengers erupted in applause. Jasmine remained quiet, watching as the man who had struck her just 30 minutes earlier was led away in disbelief. Within 15 minutes, a new pilot boarded the aircraft. Captain Layla Johnson, a black woman in her 40s with commander's stripes on her uniform, walked directly to Jasmine's seat. "Ms. Wright," she said quietly, "on behalf of Sky America Airlines, I want to personally apologize for the inexcusable treatment you received today. We've been instructed to continue this flight to San Francisco with you on board, if you're comfortable proceeding." Jasmine nodded. "Thank you, Captain Johnson. I'd like to continue to my destination." As Captain Johnson prepared for departure, something unprecedented happened. The main cabin screens, normally used for safety demonstrations, illuminated with the face of Michael Townsend, Sky America's Vice President of Operations. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is an unusual circumstance, but I wanted to address all passengers of Flight 1267 directly. The behavior you witnessed today from Captain Harrison violates everything our airline stands for. He has been removed from duty pending full investigation and likely termination. Sky America has zero tolerance for discrimination or violence of any kind." Townsend continued, "Each of you will receive full refunds for today's flight, plus vouchers for future travel. We especially want to apologize to Ms. Wright for the inexcusable treatment she experienced. Captain Johnson and her crew will ensure the remainder of your journey is comfortable and meets the standards you deserve." What Townsend didn't mention, what only a handful of top executives knew at that moment, was exactly who Jasmine Wright was. The emergency board calls that had preceded this unprecedented video address had revealed only that our major stakeholder was personally involved in an incident. Most assumed it was a board member's relative, not the actual power player herself. As the aircraft pushed back for departure, Pamela Miller approached Jasmine with a cold compress for her cheek and a glass of champagne. "Ms. Wright, is there anything else I can get for you?" she asked, her earlier hostility replaced with nervous deference. "Just equal treatment for all your passengers, Ms. Miller," Jasmine replied calmly. "That's all anyone is asking for." By the time Flight 1267 landed in San Francisco 3 hours later, the story had exploded across all major news outlets. Footage from multiple angles showed Harrison's assault on Jasmine, his racist remark clearly audible. Sky America's stock had dropped 5% in afternoon trading amid calls for boycotts and regulatory investigation. As Jasmine deplaned in San Francisco, a text message appeared on her phone from her executive assistant, "Emergency board meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. Your presence requested but not required." Jasmine smiled slightly as she typed her response, "I'll be there." Time to stop being silent. The power had shifted, though most of Sky America's leadership still had no idea just how dramatically their world would change by this time tomorrow. What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Would you reveal your identity immediately, or strategically wait to see how the company handles the situation? Type number 1 in the comments if you think she should have exposed her ownership immediately after the slap, or number 2 if her patient approach was smarter. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see how this powerful woman uses her position to transform an entire industry. Now, what do you think awaits Captain Harrison and the Sky America executives at tomorrow's emergency board meeting? The next morning, the atmosphere inside Sky America's gleaming headquarters in Atlanta was electric with tension. In the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor, CEO Walter Phillips paced nervously, his typically immaculate appearance showing signs of a sleepless night, tie slightly askew, dark circles beneath bloodshot eyes. "This is a complete disaster," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow despite the room's aggressive air conditioning. "Harrison has been with us 30 years. What the hell was he thinking?" Around the massive mahogany table, 14 board members and senior executives sat in uncomfortable silence, smartphones buzzing incessantly with notifications. The wall-mounted screens displayed a continuous feed of social media reactions and news coverage, none of it favorable to Sky America. #Justice for Jasmine is the #1 trending topic worldwide, reported Valerie Simmons, the airline's chief marketing officer. "We've counted over 2 million tweets in the last 18 hours. Celebrity influencers are calling for boycotts. Our customer service lines are completely overwhelmed." "What about Harrison?" asked James Blackwell, a longtime board member and friend of the disgraced pilot. "Surely we're providing him legal representation. 30 years of service deserves some loyalty." Phillips slammed his hand on the table. Harrison went on Good Morning USA an hour ago and made things exponentially worse. Did you see it? He gestured to an assistant who immediately played the clip on the main screen. There was Harrison, somehow looking both defiant and victimized, speaking to a sympathetic interviewer. "I was protecting the safety and comfort of all passengers," Harrison insisted on screen. "First class has standards. We've had incidents where passengers become confrontational when they feel out of place. I believed she was recording flight crew against regulations and creating a security risk." "So you deny that race played any factor in the incident?" the interviewer asked. "I've flown thousands of flights with passengers of all backgrounds," Harrison replied, sidestepping the question. "This is about behavior, not race. That woman was disruptive, and in a post-9/11 world, we have to take security seriously." Phillips muted the feed. He's painting himself as some kind of security hero while half the internet is calling him Slappy Harrison and creating memes about him. The FAA and DOJ are both opening investigations. This is an unmitigated catastrophe. Franklin Spencer, the airline's chief operating officer and Harrison's longtime golf buddy, cleared his throat. "Walter, I think we're overreacting. These things blow over. We issue a standard apology, offer the woman some free flights, and..." The boardroom doors swung open, silencing Spencer mid-sentence. All heads turned to see Chairman William Foster entering, accompanied by a woman whose face was now recognized by millions, Jasmine Wright. The bruise on her cheek was faint but visible, even under careful makeup. "Ladies and gentlemen," Foster announced, "I believe many of you know Ms. Wright by reputation, though you may not have been aware of her connection to our company." Confused glances circulated around the table. Phillips stepped forward. "Ms. Wright, on behalf of Sky America, I want to personally..." "Save it," Foster interrupted. "Ms. Wright isn't here for apologies. Perhaps I should properly introduce her. This is Jasmine Wright, founder and CEO of CyberShield, and for the past 2 years, the controlling investor behind Horizon Capital." The room went deadly silent as the implications sank in. Horizon Capital was the mysterious investment group that had acquired 40% of Sky America's shares 2 years ago, gaining 3 board seats and significant influence over company operations. "Ms. Wright is our largest shareholder," Foster concluded, enjoying the shocked expressions around the table. Jasmine stepped forward, her presence commanding despite her youth compared to most in the room. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I believe we have some urgent matters to discuss. You're the owner of Horizon Capital?" Philip stammered, his face draining of color. "I am," Jasmine confirmed, taking a seat at the head of the table, Philip's usual chair. "And contrary to what Mr. Spencer was suggesting before I entered, this situation will not simply blow over with a standard apology and some free flights." She opened a sleek leather portfolio and removed a tablet. "For the past 2 years, I've been traveling on Sky America flights, economy, business, and first class, documenting every instance of discriminatory treatment I personally experienced or witnessed toward other passengers of color." With a tap on her tablet, the boardroom screens changed to display a comprehensive database of incidents, dates, flight numbers, employee names, and detailed descriptions, all meticulously categorized. 67 flights, Jasmine continued. On 43 of them, I documented clear discriminatory treatment. Different service standards, extra scrutiny of tickets, seating errors that somehow always affected passengers of color, selective enforcement of policies, the pattern is unmistakable. She swiped to another screen showing passenger complaint statistics. "Your own internal data, which my team accessed through my board representatives, shows that complaints from passengers of color are systematically categorized as unsubstantiated at 3 times the rate of complaints from white passengers." Franklin Spencer shifted uncomfortably. "With all due respect, Ms. Wright, selective interpretation of customer service interactions doesn't prove." "I'm not finished, Mr. Spencer," Jasmine cut him off sharply. "Yesterday wasn't my first interaction with Captain Harrison." She played a video showing Harrison making similar comments to her on a flight 6 months earlier, though without the physical assault. Then another from a different flight where he had a black family removed for non-compliance when they questioned being reseated from first class due to an alleged computer error. My team has identified 28 similar incidents involving Captain Harrison over the past 5 years, Jasmine explained. Each complaint was reviewed by your office, Mr. Spencer, and each was dismissed as unsubstantiated despite corroborating evidence. Spencer's face reddened. You've been spying on this company? I've been conducting due diligence as a major investor, Jasmine corrected. And what I've found is a systemic problem that goes far beyond one pilot losing his temper. She placed a thick binder on the table. This contains testimonials from 73 former Sky America employees, predominantly people of color, who experienced or witnessed discriminatory practices within the company. 15 of them specifically name you, Mr. Spencer, as having personally blocked their advancement or terminated them when they raised concerns. The room erupted in a chaos of voices, denials, demands for explanation, expressions of outrage from various factions of the board. Chairman Foster banged the gavel for order. MS. Right, Phillips said when the room quieted, what exactly are you seeking here? A settlement? Policy changes? Jasmine looked him directly in the eyes. I'm seeking a complete overhaul of this company's culture, starting from the top. By the end of this meeting, I'll be calling for votes on the removal of certain executives, including you, Mr. Phillips, and you, Mr. Spencer. Phillips blanched. You can't just. I control 40% of voting shares, Jasmine reminded him. And after yesterday's incident and Harrison's disastrous interview this morning, I've received commitment of support from institutional investors representing another 15%. Do the math. The reality of the situation descended on the room like a physical weight. This wasn't just about damage control for a PR crisis. This was a palace coup. I didn't invest in Sky America to destroy it, Jasmine continued, her tone softening slightly. I invested because I believe this airline could be transformed into an industry leader for equality and excellence. But that transformation requires removing the cancer of discrimination that has been allowed to metastasize throughout this organization. Are you shocked by the power move Jasmine just made? Type number 1 in the comments if you think she's been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Can you believe she spent 2 years documenting discrimination before making her move? Like this video if you're amazed by her patience and strategic thinking. Now, do you think the Sky America executives deserve a chance to save their jobs, or should Jasmine clean house completely? And what do you think Franklin Spencer will do when he realizes his career is on the line? Subscribe now to find out how this corporate showdown unfolds. By sunset, news of the boardroom confrontation had leaked to select media outlets. The business press was abuzz with speculation about the identity of Sky America's mysterious major shareholder, though Jasmine's name remained protected by careful NDAs. What the public did know was that a significant leadership shakeup was underway following the viral assault incident. Franklin Spencer had not accepted his impending downfall gracefully. Within hours of the emergency board meeting, he had assembled a coalition of resistant executives and board members in the penthouse bar of the Intercontinental Hotel, 6 blocks from Sky America headquarters. This is nothing short of a hostile takeover using social justice as a Trojan horse, Spencer declared to the group of 8 allies, including James Blackwell and 2 other board members. This right woman has been planning this for years, deliberately creating situations to document and exaggerate routine customer service issues. The slap was inexcusable, admitted Blackwell, but one incident shouldn't bring down an entire company leadership. Thomas is being sacrificed, Spencer agreed, signaling the bartender for another scotch. But he's just the beginning. Wright won't stop until she's replaced every one of us with her own people. Across town, Thomas Harrison sat in his suburban Atlanta home, watching his 30-year career implode on every news channel. His phone rang for the 20th time that hour, Franklin Spencer again. We're organizing resistance, Spencer explained after Harrison answered. Several board members, key shareholders, pilot union representatives. We can fight this. I'm radioactive, Frank, Harrison replied bitterly. Nobody's going to publicly stand with me now. You're the face of this fight whether you like it or not, Spencer insisted. We need you to keep doing interviews, emphasizing the security angle. Make this about overzealous enforcement of post-9/11 protocols, not race. Play the decorated veteran card. Harrison glanced at his Air Force service photo on the wall. I already have 3 interview requests for tomorrow. CNN, Fox, and Aviation Weekly. Take them all, Spencer directed. We're launching a counteroffensive. The next morning, that counteroffensive began in earnest. Harrison appeared on national television, portraying himself as a victim of cancel culture and corporate politics. I served this country for 12 years before joining Sky America, he told the sympathetic Fox interviewer. I've always put passenger safety first. One split-second judgment call shouldn't erase that legacy. Simultaneously, Spencer executed the second phase of his plan. Using his access to Sky America's internal systems, he leaked selectively edited snippets of Jasmine's boardroom presentation to industry bloggers, framing her investigation as a premeditated scheme to seize control. Breaking, Sky America takeover plot exposed, read the headline on aviationinsider.com. Sources reveal investor deliberately created incidents to document. The story included out-of-context quotes from Jasmine's presentation and anonymous criticisms of her methods. Within hours, a counternarrative was forming in certain corners of the internet. Jasmine Wright was an opportunistic corporate raider using racial politics to execute a hostile takeover. The leaks had their intended effect. By midday, Sky America was facing a new crisis: employee walkouts. Dozens of flight attendants and ground staff at Atlanta's hub, many of them white employees loyal to the old guard, called in sick or staged informal protests. Captain Harrison has always been fair to everyone, insisted Linda Morales, a 20-year flight attendant, to a local news crew outside the airport. If he felt a passenger was being disruptive, I trust his judgment. Now we're all being called racists because of one incident. Inside Sky America headquarters, Jasmine watched these developments with calculated calm. In a temporary office provided by Chairman Foster, she conferred with her growing team of allies. Spencer's playing exactly as expected, she told Darius Jackson, her childhood friend who now served as head of security for Cyber Shield. Tall and imposing with keen analytical eyes, Darius had been Jasmine's strategic advisor since her company's founding. He accessed your presentation less than an hour after the board meeting, Darius confirmed, showing her a security report. The leaks were strategic, just enough information to spin without revealing your identity. And Harrison? Doing interviews all day. They're building a narrative around security protocols and trying to make you the villain. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. What about the walkouts? 43 employees so far, mostly from departments directly under Spencer's control. Some genuine, some pressured. We've identified at least 15 who received direct calls from Spencer or his deputies last night. The door opened, and Anthony Daniels entered. The attorney who had stood up for Jasmine on the flight had officially joined her team that morning, bringing decades of civil rights litigation experience. Ms. Wright, I've been contacted by 16 former Sky America employees since yesterday, he reported. All with similar stories of discrimination. 3 specifically mentioned Spencer blocking promotions based on race. 2 have documented evidence. And the class action potential? Very strong. I've identified 47 passengers with legitimate discrimination claims from the past 3 years alone. With your documentation, we could. Jasmine's phone buzzed with an urgent news alert. Captain Harrison files defamation lawsuit against passenger Jasmine Wright, seeks $20 million in damages. Right on schedule, Jasmine remarked, showing the others the alert. Spencer's fingerprints are all over this. The lawsuit is meritless, there's video evidence of the assault, but it's a pressure tactic and a distraction. There's more, Darius said grimly, checking his tablet. Your identity as Horizon Capital's owner leaked 10 minutes ago. Business Insider has the story. Within moments, Jasmine's phone began ringing incessantly with calls from journalists, business associates, and even family members surprised by the revelation. Spencer must have had someone trace the ownership structure, Darius surmised. The timing is deliberate, maximum chaos before tomorrow's formal board vote. The chaos intensified throughout the afternoon. Online harassment campaigns targeted Jasmine with racist and sexist attacks. Death threats arrived by email. Sky America's stock continued its nosedive, losing another 7% by market close. Anthony returned from a series of calls looking concerned. We have another problem. Spencer's allies are approaching individual shareholders, suggesting that your takeover will tank the company's value. They're proposing a coordinated effort to force you to sell your shares by driving the price down further. A classic bear raid, Jasmine observed. Spencer thinks if he can create enough pressure and negative publicity, I'll cut my losses and walk away. Will you? Anthony asked directly. Jasmine stood and walked to the window, looking out over Atlanta's skyline. For a moment, her carefully maintained composure slipped, revealing the weight of the situation. 20 years ago, my mother saved for 6 months to buy me a plane ticket to visit my grandmother in Chicago, she said quietly. It was my first flight. The gate agent made my mother open our carry-on 3 times, claiming it looked suspicious. On board, a flight attendant moved a white family away from us after they complained. I was 8 years old, wearing my best dress, so excited to fly. And I was treated like a criminal. She turned back to face them. I didn't buy into Sky America just for business reasons. I did it because some battles need to be fought from the inside. Spencer thinks I'll break under pressure. He has no idea who he's dealing with. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Chairman Foster, emergency situation. Spencer accessing sensitive financial records. Security alerted. It's getting ugly, Darius observed. Good, Jasmine replied with surprising calm. The uglier Spencer and Harrison make this, the clearer the choice becomes for everyone else. Now, let's prepare for Phase 2. As night fell over Atlanta, both sides were digging in for a corporate battle unlike anything Sky America had ever seen. Spencer and Harrison believed they were fighting to save their careers and legacies. What they didn't realize was that Jasmine Wright had anticipated their every move, and their resistance was playing directly into her larger strategy. In her hotel suite that evening, Jasmine received an unexpected call from a blocked number. When she answered, a nervous voice spoke, "Ms. Wright? This is Kevin Zhao, first officer under Captain Harrison for 6 years. There are things about him you need to know. Things that never made it into official reports." As Jasmine listened to the pilot's revelations, a small, determined smile formed on her lips. Spencer and Harrison had just lost tomorrow's battle before it even began. Rain pounded the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jasmine's penthouse suite at the Four Seasons Atlanta. It was 2:17 a.m., but sleep wasn't an option. The day's events had escalated the situation beyond even her careful predictions. Spencer's aggressive counterattack, Harrison's lawsuit, the employee walkouts, the stock manipulation attempt, all of it demanded a comprehensive response. Jasmine stood at the window, watching lightning flash across the city skyline. Behind her, the suite's dining table had been transformed into a command center. Darius Jackson worked intently at a laptop, while Anthony Daniels reviewed documents, yellow legal pad filled with notes. "Spencer's smarter than I gave him credit for," Jasmine admitted. "The bear raid on the stock is particularly troubling. If they drive the share price down enough, some of our institutional support might waver." "It's not just Spencer," Darius replied without looking up from his screen. "I've traced some of the stock activity. Harrison's brother-in-law works at Meridian Capital. They've been quietly shorting Sky America stock since yesterday morning. Insider trading," Anthony noted. "Add it to the list of legal violations." Jasmine turned from the window. This was never going to be easy. Systemic discrimination doesn't survive this long without powerful protectors. She sat down at the table, determination hardening her features. But we're not backing down. Not now, not ever. Her mind drifted back to the reason this mission had become so personal. Darius Jackson wasn't just her head of security, he'd been her best friend since 3rd grade. At 17, Darius had saved enough from his after-school job to buy a plane ticket to visit his father in Los Angeles. Despite having a confirmed first-class ticket, a special splurge for his first flight, he was downgraded at the gate with a flimsy excuse about computer errors. That airline had been Sky America. "Remember when you couldn't visit your dad?" Jasmine asked softly. Darius nodded, finally looking up from his work. "I remember you promising to buy an airline someday, so that would never happen again." "I thought you were joking." "I never joke about promises," Jasmine replied. She straightened her shoulders and addressed them both. "All right, we need a comprehensive strategy. Spencer and Harrison are playing a short game: create chaos, drive down the stock, force me out. We need to play the long game." Three-pronged approach, Darius suggested, shifting into strategic mode. Corporate, legal, and public opinion. "I agree," Anthony said. "We need to isolate Spencer from his allies while building our own coalition." For the next hour, they mapped out a detailed battle plan. By dawn, as the rain finally subsided, they had developed a comprehensive strategy. First, Jasmine summarized, "We need allies. I'll reach out to Layla Morrison at Black Business Alliance and James Chen at Asian American Commercial Network. Together, their members control significant consumer spending. The threat of a coordinated boycott will get attention. I've already spoken with Tiffany Douglas at Travelers United," Anthony added. "They're preparing a statement supporting our efforts to transform Sky America's culture." Corporate strategy, Darius continued, pulling up a spreadsheet. "I've identified 6 board members who are politically vulnerable. Their other board positions or businesses could face boycotts if they publicly support Spencer. We approached them individually with both carrot and stick." Jasmine nodded. "Meanwhile, I'll meet privately with the institutional investors. The employees' pension fund controls 7% of shares, and their charter has a social responsibility clause we can leverage. Same with state university endowments 3%. Legal front," Anthony said, tapping his legal pad. "The class action lawsuit is our nuclear option. I've already connected with 27 former employees willing to testify about discrimination. We don't file immediately, just let Spencer know we're prepared to do so." "And what about Harrison's defamation suit?" Jasmine asked. "Pure intimidation tactic. I'll file a countersuit for assault and battery today. Additionally, I've prepared a motion for an emergency injunction against the Bear raid, citing market manipulation." Jasmine stood up and began pacing, energy renewed despite the sleepless night. "We also need to address the employees who walked out. Not all of them are lost causes. Many probably felt pressured or simply don't have all the facts. I've drafted an open letter to all Sky America employees," Darius said, pulling up a document. "It outlines your vision for the company, not downsizing, but growth with integrity. Not punishment, but transformation. We emphasize job security for everyone who embraces the new direction." As sunrise painted the Atlanta skyline in gold, Jasmine's phone rang. It was Kevin Zhao, the first officer who had contacted her the previous evening. "Ms. Wright? I've spoken with the other pilots. 15 of us are ready to come forward about Harrison's behavior over the years. And we have documentation, flight logs, recorded conversations, witnesses. He's been doing this for decades, and Spencer has been covering for him. We can prove it." After ending the call, Jasmine shared the development with her team. "This changes everything. With pilots coming forward, the narrative shifts completely. From your word against Harrison's to a pattern of behavior confirmed by his own colleagues, Anthony noted. Exactly, Jasmine agreed. Now we need to get this information into the right hands before tomorrow's shareholder meeting. Throughout that day, Jasmine's three-pronged strategy unfolded with precision. By noon, she had secured commitments from minority business alliances representing over 30 million consumers. By mid-afternoon, Anthony had filed the countersuit against Harrison, complete with affidavits from 12 passengers who had witnessed the assault. Simultaneously, Darius coordinated meetings with key board members, presenting them with both evidence of Spencer's misconduct and details of Jasmine's vision for Sky America's future. The tide began to turn when 3 institutional investors publicly announced their support for Jasmine's leadership bid, citing concerns about cultural deficiencies within the current management team. The stock stabilized, then began a modest recovery. As evening approached, Jasmine took her most public step yet, an exclusive interview with Natalie Rivera, the respected host of Business Tonight. The interview was a calculated risk, but one Jasmine felt necessary to counter the narrative Spencer had been promoting. Ms. Wright, Rivera began after introductions, you've become the center of an extraordinary corporate drama. Some are calling your efforts a hostile takeover disguised as a social justice campaign. How do you respond? Jasmine met the challenge directly. I invested in Sky America 2 years ago because I saw a company with great potential being held back by a toxic culture. The incident on Flight 1267 wasn't an anomaly. It was the predictable result of systemic issues that current leadership has repeatedly failed to address. But your critics say you deliberately created situations to document problems, with the goal of seizing control. I traveled as a normal passenger, experiencing what thousands of other travelers experience every day, Jasmine countered. The only difference is that I had the resources to document these patterns and the determination to change them. The interview continued for 30 minutes, with Jasmine artfully balancing corporate strategy talk with personal passion. She revealed select details of pilot testimonials without compromising their identities, outlined her vision for Sky America's cultural transformation, and addressed the employee walkouts with empathy rather than condemnation. To those employees, she said near the conclusion, I want to say, I'm not your enemy. I believe in this airline and its potential. I want Sky America to be a place where every employee can thrive and every passenger feels valued, regardless of their background. The changes ahead aren't about punishment, they're about progress. As the interview concluded, Jasmine received an urgent text from Darius, turn on CNN now. She quickly switched channels to find Harrison giving a live interview, but something was different. His previously defiant demeanor had crumbled. Mid-sentence, he stopped as someone off-camera apparently showed him something on a phone. His face drained of color. Mr. Harrison, the interviewer prompted. You were saying about Ms. Wright's allegations? Harrison stared straight ahead, momentarily frozen. I need to end this interview. No further comments. He removed his microphone with trembling hands and walked off set. Jasmine's phone immediately rang, Darius again. What happened? She asked. Kevin Zhao happened, Darius replied, satisfaction evident in his voice. He just sent Harrison the complete dossier of evidence they've compiled, recordings, logs, testimonials from 15 pilots. Harrison just realized he's not just fighting you anymore. He's fighting his own colleagues. Later that night, as Jasmine prepared for the decisive shareholders meeting the next morning, she received one more unexpected call, from Chairman Foster. Ms. Wright, I thought you should know. Spencer attempted to access and delete company records this evening. Security caught him in the act. He's been escorted from the building and placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The chairman paused before adding, I believe tomorrow's vote will go very differently than Spencer anticipated. Jasmine ended the call and turned to her team. Spencer just overplayed his hand. Now we finish this, not just for us, but for every passenger who's ever been made to feel they don't belong, and every employee who's been denied opportunity because of who they are. The stage was set for the most consequential shareholders' meeting in Sky America's history. What had begun as a shocking incident in first class was about to transform an entire company. Morning sunlight gleamed off the glass facade of Sky America headquarters as limousines and town cars lined up at the entrance. Security was unprecedented, private guards supplementing the building's regular force, checking credentials meticulously as shareholders and executives arrived for the emergency meeting. News vans crowded the street, reporters doing live stand-ups with the dramatic backdrop of demonstrators on both sides, employees supporting the old guard faced off against civil rights activists and consumer advocates backing Jasmine's reform efforts. Inside the building's grand auditorium, tensions ran high. The space, normally used for annual meetings and major announcements, had been transformed into something resembling a courtroom. The main stage featured a long table where the board of directors sat in ascending order of seniority, with Chairman Foster at the center. To the left, rows of seats held major shareholders and institutional investor representatives. To the right, company executives fidgeted nervously. At precisely 9 a.m., Chairman Foster called the meeting to order with a somber tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face an unprecedented situation that threatens the very future of Sky America Airlines. Today's agenda includes one primary item, a vote of confidence in current executive leadership, followed by consideration of proposed changes to company governance and culture." The rear doors opened, and all heads turned as Franklin Spencer entered, flanked by two attorneys. Despite being placed on administrative leave, his status as Chief Operating Officer technically allowed him attendance. His face was a mask of defiance as he took a seat in the front row of the executive section. Moments later, another stir rippled through the auditorium as Thomas Harrison arrived. Though he held no leadership position that would normally grant him access to such a meeting, Spencer had arranged a special dispensation, arguing that Harrison's perspective was essential given his central role in the controversy. Foster acknowledged their presence with a tight nod before continuing. "Before we begin formal proceedings, Jasmine Wright has requested time to address the shareholders regarding her investment position and concerns about company operations." The atmosphere electrified as Jasmine entered from the side of the stage, accompanied by Darius Jackson and Anthony Daniels. She wore a tailored navy suit, projecting confident professionalism. The bruise on her cheek had faded but remained faintly visible, a silent testament to the incident that had catalyzed this showdown. "Thank you, Chairman Foster," Jasmine began, her voice steady and clear through the microphone. 2 years ago, I invested in Sky America Airlines through my investment firm, Horizon Capital. Today, I control approximately 40% of voting shares, making me the largest individual stakeholder in this company." Murmurs spread through the audience as she continued. "My investment wasn't merely financial. I believed then, as I do now, that Sky America has tremendous potential to be an industry leader, not just in profitability, but in equity, inclusion, and customer experience for all passengers." She tapped her tablet, and the large screens around the auditorium displayed charts detailing Sky America's customer satisfaction scores, broken down by passenger demographics. "The data tells a disturbing story," Jasmine explained. "Passengers of color consistently report negative experiences at 3 times the rate of white passengers. Even controlling for all other factors, class of service, frequent flyer status, route, this disparity persists. This isn't anecdotal, it's statistical reality." Spencer shifted forward in his seat, whispering urgently to his attorneys. Jasmine noticed but continued undeterred. "Beyond statistics, my team has documented specific incidents." The screens changed to show a timeline of events, carefully anonymized to protect victims' identities while highlighting patterns of discriminatory treatment. "But perhaps most troubling," Jasmine continued, "is how these incidents were handled internally." She displayed internal emails and complaint resolution records. Under Mr. Spencer's direction, complaints from passengers of color were systematically dismissed at a rate of 78%, compared to 23% for white passengers. Spencer shot to his feet. "This is a gross misrepresentation of context. Those complaints were evaluated according to standard protocols." "Mr. Spencer," Chairman Foster interrupted sharply, "You'll have your opportunity to respond. Please allow Ms. Wright to finish." Jasmine nodded gratefully and continued. "The incident on Flight 1267 wasn't an isolated event. It was the predictable outcome of a culture that has normalized differential treatment." She then introduced Anthony Daniels, who presented a summary of testimonials from former employees detailing discriminatory practices in hiring, promotion, and discipline. As he spoke, Spencer grew visibly agitated, repeatedly conferring with his attorneys. When Anthony finished, Spencer was finally recognized to speak. He approached the podium with calculated confidence. "What we're witnessing today is nothing short of a premeditated corporate raid disguised as social justice advocacy," he declared. "Ms. Wright didn't invest in Sky America to improve it, she invested to seize control through manufactured controversy." Murmurs rippled through the audience as Spencer continued. "Consider the facts. She traveled on dozens of flights specifically looking for issues to document. She recorded interactions without disclosure. She built a case over years before revealing herself as our largest shareholder. These are not the actions of a concerned investor, they're the calculated moves of a corporate predator." Spencer gestured toward Harrison. "Captain Harrison has served this airline with distinction for 30 years. One regrettable incident, which occurred, let me remind you, after Ms. Wright was recording crew members without permission, is being used to demonize not just him, but our entire leadership team." Harrison nodded solemnly, his earlier bravado replaced with a more sympathetic demeanor. He had clearly been coached on his appearance for this meeting. "Ms. Wright wants you to believe she's on a moral crusade," Spencer concluded. "But ask yourselves, what happens to your investment if she succeeds? Will an airline run on social experiments rather than sound business practices survive in this competitive industry? I think not." As Spencer returned to his seat, looking satisfied with his performance, Jasmine signaled to Darius, who nodded and slipped out a side door. Chairman Foster addressed the room. "We'll now hear from Captain Harrison regarding the incident on Flight 1267. Harrison approached the podium with practiced humility. "I want to begin by expressing my sincere regret for how events unfolded on that flight," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "In my 30 years of service, I've always prioritized passenger safety and comfort." He continued with a narrative that portrayed Jasmine as confrontational and himself as a dedicated professional making split-second judgment calls in the interest of flight security. He emphasized his military service, his spotless safety record, and his thousands of flights without incident. "One moment of misjudgment shouldn't erase a lifetime of service," he concluded, echoing his television interviews. As Harrison finished, the side door opened, and Darius returned accompanied by a man in a pilot's uniform, Kevin Zhao, Harrison's former first officer. Behind them came 5 more pilots and 3 flight attendants, all in uniform. Spencer half rose from his seat in alarm. "What is this? These people aren't shareholders or executives. They are, however, Sky America employees with direct knowledge of relevant matters," Chairman Foster ruled. "I've granted them speaking privileges." Kevin Zhao stepped forward, his expression resolute despite obvious nervousness. "My name is Kevin Zhao. I served as first officer under Captain Harrison for 6 years until I requested reassignment last year." The room fell silent as Zhao continued. "What happened on Flight 1267 wasn't an isolated incident or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was consistent with behavior I and others witnessed repeatedly." Zhao detailed specific incidents. Harrison denying pre-flight cockpit visits to children of color while welcoming white children, making racist comments about passengers over crew channels, deliberately delaying flights when he felt there were too many minorities in first class. 7 of us filed formal complaints, Zhao revealed. All were routed through Mr. Spencer's office. All were dismissed. One by one, the other pilots and flight attendants stepped forward, each adding their own testimonials. The cumulative effect was devastating to Harrison's carefully constructed image as a dedicated professional who had made one mistake. Harrison's face had turned ashen. Spencer leaned forward, furiously scribbling notes to his attorneys, who looked increasingly concerned. When the employees finished, Jasmine returned to the podium. The systemic nature of these issues demands systemic solutions. I'm not here to destroy Sky America. I'm here to transform it into the airline it should be, where every passenger receives equal treatment and every employee has equal opportunity. She outlined her vision: comprehensive retraining for all customer-facing staff, revised complaint procedures with independent oversight, diversity initiatives in hiring and promotion, and most critically, new leadership committed to these values. Today, I formally call for votes on the following items, Jasmine concluded. First, the removal of Franklin Spencer as Chief Operating Officer. Second, the creation of a new executive position focusing on equity and inclusion. Third, the adoption of the comprehensive reform plan my team has submitted to the board. Chairman Foster called for a 30-minute recess before the vote. As shareholders and executives filed out for consultations, Spencer approached Jasmine with barely contained fury. "You won't get away with this," he hissed. "I have evidence that will destroy your credibility completely." Jasmine met his gaze calmly. "I think we both know who's running out of options, Mr. Spencer." The confrontation that had begun with a slap in first class was reaching its climax. For better or worse, Sky America would never be the same after today. When the recess ended, the auditorium had transformed. Tension had crystallized into something more potent: anticipation. Institutional investors huddled in small groups, whispering urgently. Board members returned with faces set in grim determination. In the executive section, several seats that had previously held Spencer's allies now sat empty, a telling sign of shifting allegiances. Chairman Foster brought the meeting back to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. "We will now proceed to the vote on Ms. Wright's proposals," he announced. Representatives from Ernst & Mueller will tabulate electronic and proxy votes to ensure complete accuracy and transparency. As the voting process began, Franklin Spencer conferred intensely with his attorneys. One shook his head vigorously while the other nodded reluctantly. Spencer's face darkened with resolve as he scribbled a note and passed it to a junior executive, who quickly left the room. Minutes ticked by as votes were cast and counted. Harrison sat alone, abandoned by former allies who now maintained careful distance. Jasmine remained composed, though Darius noticed her fingers tapping a subtle rhythm on her armrest, a habit from childhood that emerged only in moments of intense pressure. Finally, the head of the accounting team approached Chairman Foster with the results. Foster reviewed them carefully before addressing the room. On the matter of removing Franklin Spencer as Chief Operating Officer, he announced, the shareholders have voted in favor by a margin of 63% to 37%. A collective intake of breath swept through the auditorium. Spencer's face reddened, but he remained seated, eyes fixed straight ahead. On the creation of a new executive position focused on equity and inclusion, the vote is 67% in favor, 33% opposed, Foster continued. And finally, on the adoption of Ms. Wright's comprehensive reform plan, the vote is 58% in favor, 42% opposed. All 3 measures have passed. Applause erupted from Jasmine's supporters while murmurs of consternation spread among the old guard. Spencer stood abruptly, buttoning his jacket with deliberate precision. "Chairman Foster, I request the floor before these proceedings continue," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Foster hesitated, then nodded. "You may have 5 minutes, Mr. Spencer, though I must remind you that you are now speaking as a former officer of this company." Spencer strode to the podium, his previous mask of corporate diplomacy abandoned. "What you've witnessed today is the culmination of a years-long conspiracy to seize control of this airline," he declared. "But there's evidence Ms. Wright conveniently omitted from her presentation." He gestured toward the back of the room, where the junior executive had returned with a flash drive. "I have here video footage that will completely discredit Ms. Wright's claims about discrimination on Flight 1267 and expose her true motives." The audience stirred with renewed interest as a technician connected the drive to the presentation system. Spencer continued with renewed confidence. This security footage from the aircraft shows what happened before Captain Harrison's admittedly regrettable reaction, specifically, Ms. Wright deliberately provoking confrontation after multiple warnings. The screens lit up with grainy footage that appeared to show Jasmine arguing aggressively with flight attendants before Harrison's intervention. In this version, she appeared to be the instigator, pointing her phone camera directly in crew members' faces despite repeated requests to stop. As you can see, Spencer said triumphantly, the narrative of an innocent passenger being randomly assaulted falls apart under scrutiny. Ms. Wright orchestrated this incident as the culmination of her takeover plan. Murmurs of confusion spread through the audience. Jasmine leaned over to whisper to Darius, who nodded and quickly typed something on his phone. Furthermore, Spencer continued, building momentum, we have evidence of Ms. Wright attempting to bribe flight attendants on previous flights to provide negative experiences to document. This isn't social justice, it's corporate espionage and manipulation. Chairman Foster frowned. These are serious allegations, Mr. Spencer. Ms. Wright, do you wish to respond? Jasmine rose calmly. I do, Chairman. But first, I'd like to ask where Mr. Spencer obtained this supposed security footage, since Sky America aircraft don't have security cameras in passenger cabins. Spencer faltered momentarily before recovering. This footage was captured by the aircraft's maintenance monitoring system, which includes limited video capability in certain areas for safety purposes. That's interesting, Jasmine replied, because no such system exists on Sky America's fleet. More importantly, the footage you're showing has been digitally altered. Darius stepped forward. We anticipated this move, Chairman Foster. The video Mr. Spencer presented shows inconsistencies in lighting, perspective, and timeline that indicate sophisticated but detectable manipulation. The audience's confusion deepened as Darius continued. More critically, we have the actual, complete footage from multiple passenger recordings, all time-stamped and verified by independent experts. He connected his own device to the system, and the screens changed to show a comprehensive video compilation from various angles, clearly showing the unprovoked nature of Harrison's assault. But perhaps most telling, Darius concluded, is that the footage Mr. Spencer presented appears to have been created by Vertex Visual Effects, a company owned by Harrison's son-in-law. We have the financial transactions showing payment for these services dated yesterday. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Spencer's face drained of color as he realized the trap he'd walked into. Mr. Spencer, Jasmine said quietly, fabricating evidence is a serious offense, both professionally and legally. Chairman Foster looked stunned. Mr. Spencer, did you knowingly present falsified evidence to this body? Before Spencer could respond, the door at the back of the auditorium opened, and two men in dark suits entered. They approached Spencer with grim determination. Franklin Spencer, one said, showing identification. I'm Special Agent Williams with the FBI. We need to speak with you regarding potential securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. The second agent turned to Harrison. Mr. Harrison, we have questions for you as well concerning potential civil rights violations. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Shareholders and executives alike stood in shock as the agents escorted Spencer and Harrison toward the exit. Spencer turned back once, his face contorted with fury as he glared at Jasmine. This isn't over, he called out. You've destroyed everything we built. No, Mr. Spencer, Jasmine replied calmly. I'm saving what could have been built if people like you hadn't stood in the way. As the doors closed behind them, Chairman Foster struggled to restore order. When the room finally quieted, he addressed the gathering with evident strain in his voice. In light of these extraordinary developments, I suggest we adjourn the formal proceedings for today. The votes have been recorded, and the approved changes will be implemented according to corporate bylaws. He turned to Jasmine. Ms. Wright, as our largest shareholder and the architect of these reforms, would you like to make any closing remarks? Jasmine approached the podium one final time, surveying the room. The shocked executives, the relieved employee witnesses, the calculating investors all waiting to hear what would come next. "What you witnessed today wasn't just about one incident or one pilot," she began. "It was about acknowledging a fundamental truth: an organization cannot reach its full potential when it systematically devalues any group of customers or employees." She paused, letting the words sink in. "The changes ahead won't be easy. Transformation rarely is. But I believe in Sky America's potential to become a model for the industry, not just in profitability, but in equity and excellence for all." Her gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on the empty seats where Spencer and Harrison had sat. "Today marks a new beginning for this company. I invite everyone in this room to be part of that journey. To build an airline where the color of a passenger's skin never determines the quality of their experience, and where every employee can rise as far as their talents will take them." As Jasmine concluded her remarks, Anthony Daniels approached her with an urgent whisper. Her eyes widened slightly before she regained her composure. "There's one more thing you should know," she added. "The FBI investigation into Mr. Spencer didn't begin today. Their financial crimes unit has been investigating him for months following whistleblower reports about financial improprieties. It appears that while Mr. Spencer was dismissing discrimination complaints, he was also embezzling company funds through fraudulent consulting contracts with firms connected to his family members." The revelation swept through the room like wildfire. The very foundation of Sky America's old guard had not just been discriminatory, it had been corrupt to its core. As the meeting finally adjourned, Jasmine found herself surrounded by board members, institutional investors, and employees, all eager to position themselves favorably with the woman who had just transformed the company's future. But her thoughts were already turning to the monumental task ahead: rebuilding an airline culture from the ground up. The confrontation had ended, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months later, a sleek jet in striking new livery touched down at San Francisco International Airport. The aircraft's fuselage gleamed in the California sunshine, proudly displaying its new identity, Horizon Air. The familiar Sky America logo and color scheme had been replaced with a modern design featuring a stylized rising sun above a diverse skyline, a visual representation of the company's transformation. Inside the terminal, Jasmine Wright stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the aircraft taxi to the gate. She wore a simple but elegant pantsuit, her natural hair styled in a sophisticated updo. Unlike 6 months ago, she made no attempt to blend in or hide her identity. The transformation of Sky America into Horizon Air had been front-page business news for months, and her face had become recognizable to millions. "Beautiful sight, isn't it?" asked Darius Jackson, standing beside her. "First official flight of the rebranded fleet." Jasmine nodded, a smile of quiet satisfaction on her face. "Worth every minute of the battle. The past 6 months have been extraordinarily demanding." Following the dramatic shareholders' meeting, Jasmine had accepted the role of executive chairwoman, overseeing the company's comprehensive overhaul while maintaining her position at Cyber Shield through a carefully structured leadership team. The transformation had begun with justice. Thomas Harrison had been sentenced to 200 hours of community service at organizations serving minority communities. Additionally, he was required to complete an intensive diversity and sensitivity training program developed by leading civil rights organizations. His pilot's license remained under review by the FAA. Franklin Spencer faced more severe consequences. The FBI investigation had uncovered years of financial misconduct, including embezzlement, kickback schemes, and manipulation of company records to conceal discriminatory practices. He now awaited trial on multiple federal charges, with several former executives cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for leniency. "Terminal 3 is ready for the press conference," Anthony Daniels said, approaching them with a tablet in hand. In the months since joining Jasmine's team, he had become Horizon Air's chief ethics officer, overseeing the complete restructuring of the company's complaint resolution procedures. "How are the numbers looking?" Jasmine asked as they walked toward the designated gate area. "Exceeding projections," Anthony replied with evident satisfaction. "Customer satisfaction up 37% overall, with the gap between demographic groups reduced to statistical insignificance. Employee retention improved by 22%. And despite initial market skepticism, stock price has recovered completely, now trading 12% above pre-incident levels. The statistics validated what Jasmine had believed from the beginning. Ethical business wasn't just morally right, it was financially sound. By addressing the systemic discrimination that had plagued the airline, they had unlocked potential that had been suppressed for decades. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. The initial rebranding announcement had faced backlash from conservative business commentators who derided it as woke capitalism. Some longtime employees had resigned rather than adapt to new standards. Industry competitors had attempted to poach corporate clients during the transition. But for every obstacle, there had been unexpected victories. Kevin Zhao, the first officer who had courageously testified against Harrison, now served as Horizon's director of flight operations. The flight attendants who had come forward had been promoted to training roles, helping reshape service standards across the fleet. Most remarkably, many of the former victims of discrimination had found justice beyond financial settlements. Jasmine had implemented a revolutionary program that offered employment opportunities to qualified individuals who had previously faced discrimination from the airline. Dozens now worked throughout the company, their experiences informing policies designed to prevent similar incidents. As Jasmine, Darius, and Anthony entered the press conference area, they were greeted by a diverse group of Horizon Air executives and employees gathered to celebrate this milestone. Among them stood Captain Layla Johnson, the pilot who had replaced Harrison on that fateful day 6 months ago. Now Horizon's most senior training captain, Johnson had become the face of the airline's new era. "Ms. Wright," Johnson said, extending her hand. "First flight arrived 10 minutes ahead of schedule. A good omen, I'd say." "The best omens are the ones we create ourselves, Captain," Jasmine replied warmly, clasping her hand. The press conference began with Jasmine taking the podium before a backdrop featuring Horizon Air's new slogan, "Equal Skies for All." Dozens of reporters and cameras captured the moment as she officially inaugurated the airline's complete rebranding. 6 months ago, an incident occurred that exposed deep-rooted problems within an airline that had lost its way, Jasmine began. "Today, we're not simply unveiling a new name and logo. We're celebrating a fundamental transformation in how an airline perceives its responsibilities, to passengers, to employees, and to society." She outlined the comprehensive changes implemented across the organization: mandatory quarterly training for all staff on unconscious bias and inclusive service, a transparent complaint system with independent oversight, recruitment initiatives targeting underrepresented groups at all levels from flight schools to executive positions, and a revolutionary customer experience philosophy centered on consistent, respectful treatment for all passengers. The incident that catalyzed these changes was painful, Jasmine acknowledged. But from that pain has come extraordinary progress. Today, Horizon Air leads the industry in both customer satisfaction and workplace diversity. As the formal presentation concluded and reporters began asking questions, Jasmine found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about her childhood in Atlanta's Greenbrier neighborhood, where dreams of flight had seemed impossibly distant for a young black girl. She remembered her mother's words after that first humiliating flight experience years ago: "Someday, things will be different. Maybe you'll be the one to change them." A reporter's question brought her back to the present. "Ms. Wright, critics suggest that your takeover of Sky America was opportunistic rather than principled. How do you respond?" Jasmine smiled, having heard this critique many times. "Principles without action remain just nice ideas. I had the opportunity to create meaningful change in an industry with a troubled history. The results speak for themselves: happier customers, more engaged employees, and yes, stronger financial performance. This wasn't about opportunity, it was about responsibility." After the press conference, Jasmine found a quiet moment alone by the windows overlooking the tarmac. A Horizon Air flight was boarding, and she watched as passengers of all backgrounds were greeted with the same warm welcome by the cabin crew. Darius joined her, following her gaze to the aircraft. Thinking about that day on Flight 1267? Actually, I was thinking about something else, Jasmine replied. Remember when we were kids, and you couldn't visit your dad because they downgraded your ticket? You told me you felt invisible, like you didn't matter to them. Darius nodded, the memory still evidently painful despite the years that had passed. I look at that plane, Jasmine continued, and I see people who won't have to feel invisible anymore. Not because we've given them special treatment, but because we've ensured equal treatment. That's what this was always about. As she prepared to board the inaugural Horizon Air return flight to Atlanta, this time as a publicly acknowledged VIP rather than an anonymous observer, Jasmine thought about the journey ahead. The transformation of one airline was just the beginning. She had already identified 2 other major carriers with troubling patterns of discrimination, and Horizon Capital was strategically acquiring shares. The investment firm had evolved into something more, a vehicle for systemic change across industries where people of color had historically been marginalized. On board, Captain Johnson's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Horizon Air Flight 100 to Atlanta. My name is Captain Layla Johnson, and on behalf of our entire crew, I want to thank you for flying with us today. Jasmine settled into her first-class seat, not as a secret observer this time, but as the architect of a new vision for air travel. As the aircraft lifted off from the runway, climbing into the clear blue California sky, she looked out at the limitless horizon, both the literal one outside her window and the metaphorical one that represented what could be accomplished when principles, power, and persistence aligned to challenge injustice. The sound of applause from fellow passengers brought her attention back inside the cabin. They had recognized her, and many were expressing their appreciation for the changes she'd implemented. An elderly black woman across the aisle leaned over. My husband worked for airlines for 40 years, she said, her eyes glistening. He always said the industry would never change in his lifetime. I wish he could see this. Jasmine reached across and squeezed the woman's hand gently. This is just the beginning, she promised. As the flight continued eastward, Jasmine opened her laptop to review plans for Horizon Air's future initiatives, a scholarship program for underprivileged youth interested in aviation careers, partnerships with historically black colleges and universities for recruitment, and a foundation dedicated to researching and addressing discrimination in transportation broadly. The transformation that had begun with a slap in first class had evolved into something far more significant, a model for how determined leadership could turn a moment of injustice into a movement for lasting change. For Jasmine Wright, the horizon ahead was boundless, filled with possibilities not just for one airline, but for an entire society learning to recognize that true excellence could only be achieved when everyone had an equal opportunity to soar. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? What do you think of Jasmine's approach to fighting systemic racism from within the system rather than just boycotting companies? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of justice and transformation, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Remember, change doesn't always come from outside pressure, sometimes it takes someone on the inside with the courage to stand up for what's right. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next video. This story teaches us that true change often requires both power and principle working together. Jasmine could have simply boycotted the airline or sued after being assaulted, but she recognized that surface-level responses rarely address root problems. Instead, she strategically positioned herself where she could enact systematic change from within. The lesson here is multi-layered. First, discrimination isn't usually about one bad apple, but about systems that enable and protect such behavior. Second, meaningful transformation requires documentation, strategy, and persistence. Quick reactions might feel satisfying but rarely create lasting impact. Third, when confronting injustice, preparation matters more than emotion. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's story reminds us that change is possible even in institutions with deeply entrenched problems. She didn't just remove the problematic individuals. She rebuilt the entire culture and created accountability systems to prevent future abuses. The ultimate message is one of empowered hope: injustice thrives when good people feel powerless to challenge it. By strategically using her resources and refusing to accept discrimination as inevitable, Jasmine created a blueprint for transforming not just one company, but potentially an entire industry.